in an effort to keep this interesting for both the people that are really new and the people that know all this, I'm gonna get some advanced stuff thrown in here, some stuff that I really haven't heard anybody talk to about online, as well as some really basic stuff that more and more people are becoming aware of. I want to talk a little bit more about your rights. You have a right to be informed of the nature and the cause of the accusation. That's the Sixth Amendment to the Constitution, and most state constitutions will also, to the federal Constitution, and most state constitutions will have that right too. That you do have the right to be informed of the nature and the cause of the accusation. Now, as I said in one of my earlier videos, there's a darn good reason why you never hear anything about this right. Back in the late 80s and 90s, there was a group of people called common lawyers, and they were coming out and they were arguing in personam jurisdiction, whether or not the government actually had jurisdiction over the person. And I can explain all about that, and I will go into all about that later on. But even though that's an issue that I would raise if I was going to trial for a malum prohibitah crime, it's a passive. Or the problem with the common law's argument was that it was a very passive argument. They just tried to pretend like it wasn't going on, and the court would just steamroll right over them. It's a passive argument. It's not an offensive argument. The subject matter argument that I'm going to be talking about in these videos is not a passive argument. You're actually asking the court questions, and you can do this still without wait. Subject matter jurisdiction is a very powerful argument in the court of law. And let me explain a little bit on what we were doing. I'm arrested for pot, for holding some pot, for possessing. Actually, the crime, by the way, we talk about smoking. Actually, if you'll notice that the crime isn't smoking pot, the crime is possession of it. It's illegal to possess these things, and that's very important, actually, and I'll explain that later because I want to tell you. But make a mental note of that for later. Notice that the crime is not illegal to smoke pot; it's illegal to possess pot. And that word possession, you might want to look up in the law dictionary. It might help you guys some. But I'm arrested. Let's just say hypothetically that I'm arrested for pot. I'm going in before court, and the issue of jurisdiction can be raised at any time. And this is how you effectively raise this argument. To give you an idea of what we were doing, I want to raise the issue of jurisdiction. I demand to be informed. They give you a complaint. You have the right to be, you have to be informed of the accusation they give you, and they give you what's called an information or a complaint or an indictment. One of those three things is what they're going to give you, that outlines what crime you did, and that's supposed to outline what you did and who you did it to. That's what the information is. That's what that paper that they give you is, and you have a right to know what you did when you go to court. You do have the right to know why they're holding you, why these people are holding you against your will, and so they give you a complaint, and on the information it's supposed to outline, let's say like the time and when you did it, and what you did, and what the injury is. Well, the information. Let's just say that this is a state case. The information for smoking pot is going to say, well, he smoked pot, but it doesn't actually outline what we would say to the judge was, well, I'm sorry, the judge. If you'll notice, the judge always asks you, do you understand the charges against you? The judge will always ask you that because they want to make sure that you understand. They'll always ask you, do you understand the charges against you? And what you do to raise subject matter jurisdiction, that's the best time to raise subject matter jurisdiction. But really the issue of subject matter can be raised at any time. And they're going to lie to you, by the way. They're going to tell you need to raise it properly. They're going to lie, and they're going to try and intimidate you and stuff if you try to do this. So just so you know. But the issue of jurisdiction can be raised at any time, and it is a good idea to both raise it vocally in court and to present a demand to dismiss for lack of jurisdiction. You want to file that paperwork in the court case and save it for appeal. If they deny it, just save it for appeal. So you have all these appealable issues. You have to set up. You have to kind of. I'm getting really into law now, but it's difficult for me to tell you about this without giving you some of the other things that you need to know. But this is all just stuff to tuck away for later. The main thing is I want to tell you kind of how this issue works, because it'll give you an idea on how we're being screwed here. On an issue, if you're arrested for a malum prohibited crime, like for example possession of a plant, possession of this plant, it'll outline, okay, this is what you did, but it doesn't. The judge says, "Do you understand?" The judge says to me, "Do you understand?" I'm looking at the information. The judge says, "Do you understand the charges against you?" I'm saying, "I'm sorry. This information fails to charge an offense. It doesn't charge an offense. It fails to specifically show me who it is that I injured him and what their injury is." And usually what would happen when we do this is the prosecuting attorney would usually speak for the state, and they would come up with, well, you broke the law, or some smart ass thing like that. You broke no, actually, a lot of prosecuting attorneys aren't that smart. They'll say, well, the state's the victim. They'll say the state's the victim. The state's the victim. Well, what is the state's injury? By me having this plant, what is the state's injury? How did I injure the state? Are you talking about the corporate state? Are you talking about the actual dirt? Did I hurt the dirt? Or that they don't actually have an injury, to speak of. There's no actual injured party. It's just you broke our law. But there's no actual victim in this case, and they can't present one. And generally by this time they've gotten mad. You do have the right to be informed, and at this point, once they start flubbering and stuff like that, I just simply say, I demand my Sixth Amendment right to be informed of the nature of the cause of the accusation. Is this malum se or malum prohibitah? And by this time, they're probably not going to want to answer, and you're going to throw a temper tantrum, and they're going to kick you out and threaten you and do all kinds of stuff. But really, you basically got them. And I have actually gotten, with judges to the point where they would say, what I would actually say to the judge, I can't believe that you're not going to establish subject matter jurisdiction in this case and waive your judicial immunity and continue to hear this case when you haven't established subject matter jurisdiction in this case, because and I've seen judges go pale when I've told them that, because they know what the hell I'm talking about. A lot of judges actually know what the hell you're talking about, because in order for a judge to have judicial immunity, they have to establish jurisdiction. If you raise subject matter jurisdiction and they don't establish jurisdiction in the case, then they don't have immunity like they have with everything else. So they actually open themselves up to lawsuits, which is what we were doing. We're filing lawsuits because they failed to establish jurisdiction in the case. And this is now why this is why I'm now a targeted individual, and have been pretty much ever since. Because I know this stuff, and they're really screwing us around, because they're passing laws that aren't crimes. And these crimes are designed to just fleece America. And if a lot of people start raising these issues in a court of law, they'd be fucked. And so they really wanted to shut me up. So they did all kinds of terrible things to me, and I'm lucky to be alive. But that is it in a nutshell. Is that there's subject matter jurisdiction is the case you're raising there, and even though the state claims to be the victim in this case, that the state doesn't really have any injury, and so the information fails to charge an offense. And you can put all that into your paperwork and file it and save it for appeal, and they're going to ignore it. They're going to pretend like they're ignoring it, but it's got them. Back in the 90s, it scared the piss out of them, and we would raise all these other issues, and generally what they would do is, we would file a writ for a speedy trial. It's always a good idea to file for a speedy trial. There's really never any reason I could think off the top of my head not to. You should always file for a speedy trial, because a lot of times they'll go over, most states, 90 days. A lot of times they'll go over that 90-day mark. You can file for a dismiss for lack of speedy trial, or at least save it for appeal. And you can win on appeal on a lot of these issues. So you want to raise all these issues. You have the right to a speedy trial. So a lot of times they would just not take us back to court until after the 90 days. And then we could file speedy trial. They don't want to set precedents that you beat a case on lack of jurisdiction. They don't want to say, okay, we really don't. This isn't really a crime. They'll just find some other reason to dismiss it. And that's inevitably what they do. We had some huge successes with this. One guy we worked with, Robert Anderson, he was in jail for Class A felony possession of marijuana with intent to sell, Class B, or 2 Class Bs and a Class C felony. This is the Midwest where they have different, those are the degrees, but these were bad. He was looking at some serious time. 9 traffic violations and 2 misdemeanors. And after he actually took a deal, he actually walked out with misdemeanor time served. And he was looking at serious time. He was a repeat offender. He was going back to prison. He walked out with misdemeanor time served because they dismissed it because the roadblock, wasn't lawful. But the real reason why we were able to get their attention is because we were raising all these legal issues and stuff like that, and we weren't backing down. And so this stuff does work, or at least it did back then. Now I'm not so sure that this can be done, because now they're with these fusion centers and they're much better organized now. They're much better organized. But on the positive side, there's a lot more people that are pissed off. So I'm hoping that we can just get this done through political means rather than through the courts. But the courts is still an option. And I think it's important that you guys do know how we're being screwed around. When you're being held in court on a non-crime that's just basically making them a whole shitload of money, it's just the beginning. Now, the war on drugs has been kind of like the reason for America becoming more and more police state. Prior to the well, let me just say it, the Drug Enforcement Agency should be shut down, and end of story. In 1963, now drugs were illegal before then, but there were state and counties and stuff like that. They had the little drug laws, and drugs really weren't all that of a problem. But in 1963, the Federal Controlled Substances Act was passed, and by 1968, this country had a drug problem. Or before 1968, but by the year I was born, this country was, everybody's getting high, and because when they made it illegal, they made it more popular. The politicians really and corrupt officials have ruined this country and made a fortune on the war on drugs. And it's not the government's job to raise your kids for you. All levels of government have gotten away with this scam for too long. The truth is simple, really. Law enforcement has the drug dealers that they bust and the drug dealers that they don't. Also, they pick and choose what drug users they bust too. It's a money-making scam because they keep the proceeds from the bust, remember. So rather than going out and chasing murderers and stuff like that, of course the cops are going to want to go to chase drug dealers, because generally a drug dealer is going to have more money on them than a murderer that they can confiscate, and more vehicles. They confiscate all these vehicles and stuff. So they're confiscating basically the competition's drugs and business, and then giving it to their own drug dealers. Drug dealers, the DEA, if you Google it, see what kind of money that those people retire on from the DEA. They keep all the money that they make. So they keep all come on. Think about it. They're keeping all the money that they make from proceeds, and they're paid. And, think about, so what is the difference between a DEA, an undercover DEA agent, and a real drug dealer? The only difference is that you tax money. Well, actually, I don't think any tax money does go to the DEA. DEA funds itself, from what I understand. I haven't actually confirmed that in 3 or 4 different sources like I normally do, but that's what I've heard. And it wouldn't surprise me if that's true. But these other things that I'm telling you about are true, because, I've got enough experience, from my younger days to know who the hell was selling me the dope when I was buying the stuff. And so I know who it is. And also I know because, I met some people that like those people that knew, but they were involved in the Mina airport scandal. And a lot of people, this Iran-Contras was all over if you're old enough, Iran-Contra was all over the news, and you all know about that little drug dealing scheme there where they were, the Contras. It's just a very ugly part of American foreign policy. If you really want to know about American foreign policy, that would be a great place to start. Start with the Contras in the 90s. In the 80s and 90s, it's just terrible what we did down there. We trained people to just torture people, terrorism and torture. And they would much rather. So again, they would much rather bust drug dealers and murderers. So the cops are out, spending all their time just chasing people that are just users. And some of these people aren't really criminals; they're just people that are just involved in the drug trade. And and when you make it illegal, you make it into it. Movies will show you a few corrupt cops, taking bribes from the drug dealers. Like in Serpico, there was like one cop there.
When the truth is the corruption goes all the way up to the presidents: Bush, Clinton, Obama, I'm sure, but Bush, Clinton for sure are definitely involved. We're definitely involved in cocaine smuggling and probably a bunch of other stuff too. So it goes all the way up to our highest offices. And a lot of people out there, you'll hear another disinformation. People want to tax drugs. Those are government employees. They still want government to be involved in taxing drugs. Is still wrong. That'll still lead to corruption. I don't want to go into why, but just think about it yourself, and you can see that as long as the government's involved in drugs, if there's some way that they can make $1 off of it, there'll still be corruption in government. The government really has no lawful jurisdiction over what we can possess. I said earlier about what we put in our bodies. Is what but really it's what the law is you're not allowed to possess. You're not allowed to possess these items. No, you're not allowed to possess these items. Is the government saying to you? It is really, marijuana is a lot about corporate interests. A lot of these drugs, you're too stupid to take care of yourself, and blah blah blah, and so they pass these laws, so it's illegal for you to possess this plant. This plant you're not allowed to possess, which is really them getting involved. And as you can see, for people that that think it's a good idea, the government tells these people, all you're really doing is you're giving government the power to police your neighbor. Well, remember, if you're going to give government the power to police your neighbor, you're giving the government the power to police you, and that means that they're going to say your smoking is no good, and your chewing tobacco is no good, and you can't do this, and you got to have sex in the missionary position with your wife, and you can't, and that's what they do, and that and a lot of people don't know this, but if you actually look up a state law book, in a lot of states that I've looked in, that is a law. You're supposed to have sex with your wife in the missionary position. That's in a law. I've looked that up in a few different states, and the law books say that. Look up the sex law in the law books. You'd be shocked to see what's against the law. You'd be shocked. And a lot of these laws were passed around 1913, and that little area in there is when the banks took over. That's when the government got crazy. They went crazy with this shit, and it's fucked up. And so the government. So once you get the government involved in drugs, all you're going to get is a corrupt government. The government really. This is supposed to be a free country. The government is not supposed to be telling us what the hell we can possess. If I have a plant in my pocket, who's a victim, and what's their injury? I mean, if I've done a crime, whether I'm high or not, I should be punished. Okay, that'll make everybody stop committing crimes, not just the drunks and the people on their cell phones that get that accidentally That'll make all the fucking bad drivers pay attention, not just the ones that are high or on their cell phones. They want to pass a blanket law, say you can't do this. Well, it shouldn't matter. If you accidentally commit manslaughter, it should be 30 years. Bam. Take them all the way to trial, put them, and it doesn't matter. That'll make everybody be careful on the road, not just the people that are drunk, not just the people, see what I'm saying? So, back on the subject of drugs, the criminal charge is possession of these items, and the government shouldn't be telling us what we can and cannot have, period. They need to, if I possess something and I'm hurting somebody else with that item, that's a crime. And
And they don't have any jurisdiction over it because there's no cause. It breaks the Sixth Amendment to the Constitution, which is to be informed of the nature and the cause of the accusation. It doesn't charge an offense. It doesn't charge a real offense. There's no crime being committed by somebody having a plant in their pocket, by somebody possessing a plant. There's no crime. And will drug addicts die if we make drugs legal? Yeah. But we can't afford to save all these drug dealers by enforcing all these drug users by enforcing laws. That's not doing anything. That's just making it more profitable. Or in a lot of ways, it's making it more attractive. So it creates corruptions on both sides of the law, both because the drugs are illegal, it makes them more valuable, and thus selling drugs becomes much more profitable. That's why we have drugs and powerful gangs in every city in the United States. We're talking about tiny little towns, like towns I know towns of 20,000 people, probably even worse than that. Little towns of 20,000 people have straight gangs, have Crips and Bloods and stuff. I mean, come on. So they're rich. These gangs are rich, and making drugs makes them more valuable. And if you want to Google, if you want to research it, Google prohibition. 1917 prohibition is when they prohibited prohibition, and then that created moonshiners. That created Al Capone, who's a moonshiner. That's where he made all his money. He's a big time gangster. I know he's kind of his story is kind of glamorized in TV, but you have to remember, I don't want to go into that now. But what will happen if we get government out of the drug business? This is what's going to happen, and I said this long before Portugal decided to make drugs legal. But I figured it'll take about 5 years. Now, first of all, you have to understand that there's a difference between pushing drugs on somebody and selling to somebody that wants to buy drugs anyway. Pushing, like if somebody is pushing crack. Now, crack has been known to kill people on the very first hit. People have a heart attack and die first time they take crack cocaine, a lot of these other hard drugs. So pushing could be charged as attempted poisoning. So you can sell drugs all you want to people that come and ask you for the drugs. And believe me, the drug dealers aren't going to have any problem finding people that want to buy drugs. But if you push crack to a school kid, crack has been known to kill people on the first hit. So it could be charged pretty effectively as an attempted poisoning. And we could be prosecuted big time. The kid would be the victim, and it would be pretty close to an attempted murder charge. And that wouldn't stop. I'm not saying that's going to stop all pushing, but it'll do a better. It's a more effective way of handling it than the way that we're handling it now. Because the way we're handling it now ain't working. So if just put yourself in the position of the drug dealer. Well, if you're a drug dealer and you're not going to get any crime at all if you just sell to all these people, and there's not going to be any shortage of people that are going to want to buy drugs. That if you can sell to all these people that come and ask you for drugs all you want, no crime. But if you try and push it on somebody that doesn't ask you, you're looking at 30 years or something. I mean, seriously looking at 30 years, not this revolving door by the head. Let's make as much money. Let's put as many people in prison as we can. We actually keep them in there for the time. That drug dealer is going to go, well, I better just sell, unless, not all of them are, some of them are still going to try and push, but a lot of them are, especially the non-criminal ones, the non-violent people that want to do drugs are going to, are just going to deal with the people that want to buy drugs anyway. And then other activities would be, and then the cops would not be wasting their time going after people that want to buy dope. They're only going to be busting the pushers and people that commit crimes, whether they're high or not. You see, if other activities would still be illegal, pushing would still be a crime. It could be prosecuted as attempted poisoning. Now, if you're high and you're like disturbing your neighbor, high or not, you're going to face criminal charges because there's a victim. The victim is your neighbor, and their injury is there's a ton of injuries. It's disturbing them. They can't sleep. They can't go to work. It could be both criminal and civil because they might lose time off work. You could sue the person in civil court as well. for time off work because they're in and out antics of drug use and all that. You see what I'm saying? There's a better way to handle this rather than just trying to arrest all of them. If my neighbors are dealing dope and they're, blasting music all the time and have people coming and going and stuff like that, well, the crime isn't the fact that they're getting high over there. The crime of the fact is that I can't sleep, and that's my injury. I can't sleep at night. I can't work. Injuries like that. And I can think of more too, but not off the top of my head. And that would be the crime. And I'm the victim. So there's an actual injured victim and injury in that case. But the fact that they're over there smoking pot, if they're just sitting over there smoking pot, it's not bothering me at all. I mean, it's none of my business. So now, a lot of people will say if we do this, drug use will go up, and I don't believe that's true. But even if let's just say drug use might go up a little bit. Maybe for a short period of time, it might go up a little bit. But then people, once the novelty of it kind of wears off, I think people's reaction towards drugs will be a lot more like their current reaction to other, over-the-counter crap that you see in, the grocery store. It's just not going to be as much of a thrill. Companies are still going to have the right to not hire you and drug test you. You're not going to be able to get sensitive jobs. We have drug testing equipment now, very effective drug testing when you have high-tech stuff that can go back, check your DNA and go back 10 years on you. Companies, they're businesses. I'm talking about the government here. The companies can, they can choose who they want to hire and who they don't want to hire. And if they don't want to hire somebody like a hospital, for example, or government jobs, they don't want to hire people on drugs, they should have that right. Companies should have the right to decide who they can hire and who they can't hire. But companies will still have the right to not hire you. Part of the, let's see. A lot of the people, what I want to say about this is that if people that are on drugs, if we do this, people that are on drugs might be able to find work a little easier. We might relieve a little bit of the homeless situation because people that are high on hard drugs and stuff probably won't be able to get any jobs that require responsibility because they won't be able to pass a drug test. But somebody that's high can usually handle something like street sweeping or maybe street sweeping or some kind of manual labor and stuff. And so it's rather than having these homeless people in and out of jail because they're high all the time, just put them to work, and that's probably what's going to give them the self-esteem to eventually get off drugs, not just keep throwing them in jail, just a revolving door and fine them, and they get behind in the fines, and they can't pay the fines because they can't get a job because they're high all the time, and they're homeless, and you see it's just this cycle that these people out there on the street get caught up in, and they can't get out of it, and of course that depresses them, so they have to take the drugs to get over the depression. Well, just leave them alone if that's what they want to do. If they want to kill themselves, let them die. Just let them die. It's not our job to run out there and be Captain Save-A-Ho and try and save all these people. In fact, the way that we're doing it now isn't working, and doing it this way is going to be a lot more effective. This will actually stop the problem. So people will be able to find work a little bit easier. People that are on drugs, I should say, should be able to find jobs a little bit more easier because they won't be in and out of jail all the time. And they might be able to find, manual labor jobs that don't require anything. And again, sensitive jobs, will drug test. That simple. If selling the drugs on the street becomes the equivalent of selling ibuprofen on the street, the value of drugs will begin to decline, and that'll drive the price down, and that'll cut into the gang's profits. And second, now probably the second, third years, probably many addicts will die because the price of drugs that kill will become so cheap that they do overdose, and that's just going to happen. That's one of the problems with this. But they're dying now as it is anyway. Plus, we have all this crime, and we're throwing all this money at it, and that's just I think that's a lesser of two evils. Meanwhile, the gang, the criminal gang, has new competition. Probably head shops, most likely, will probably will come up, or something like that. That will. I don't want the government involved in selling our drugs to us. That will get us a corrupt government. Just some business that wants a head shop, wants to sell. The gang will have new problems because you'll have head shops that'll be selling not street drugs, and therefore are less likely to be fatal. And there will be some gang clashes probably between the head shops and the gangs, but we have that now. We have that times a million now. So in 10 years, this drug problem, well, in 5 years, our courts and jails won't be filled with people with drug users. And here's a very important point to consider that I've left up for the last thing. And if you disagree with me on this topic, I got to commend you for listening to this. I probably should have said this earlier, because this is the big whammy that all people that are against drug use will have to. What I want you really to consider, and if you do run across somebody who wants to argue this with you, you have to remember that drugs will be so cheap that it will be less likely the drug users will have to steal to get their fix. Drug use will decline because it's just not as much fun anymore. People's reaction to drugs will be more like their current reaction to any over-the-counter aspirin, and actually be more like their current reaction to like cigarettes. Actually, it's just not good for you. That's what people's reaction will change to. It's just people are just going to, okay, well, it's no fun now. We're not really, it's just the reaction to it for the majority of people. They'll just realize that drugs they're just not good for you. We can still put a Saturday morning cartoon telling people that, especially the children, that the drugs are bad, and this will actually do a lot more to stop drug use than having a cop tell you that you can't. It'll also relieve a little bit of the stranglehold that the American Medical Association and the pharmaceutical companies have over our medical care. We've been fed this garbage that we're too stupid to take care of ourselves, to figure out what's best for ourselves for too long by these people. I'm sorry, but that's just the way I feel about it. The only relatively good argument against this idea is and this is what you're going to hear the opposition say, well, what kind of message are we sending our kids? Well, we can still tell our children about the danger of drugs. That's a better message than telling your kid you can't. And again, this is where the media and more businesses that could put, advertisements about drugs, that, it'll create that'll sprout up. I would say that the war on drugs and the Controlled Substance Act was a stupid idea. But since the government employees got rich and the government's power and size increased, I can't really say that it was stupid on their part at all. What really remains is how much longer America is going to fall for it. Of course, if I speak out against, this bogus legislation, I'm accused of not caring about whether or not people are on drugs or not. Let me see how much time this. Okay, I'm up to 32 minutes on this one. So this one's really long. So I'm going to stop it here, review it, and the next one is going to be on some very similar topics.